Sinead with Viprik here with some exciting news. Town Meeting Day elections for mayor, city council, and more will be using ranked choice voting, and all Burlington voters get to participate. Unfamiliar with ranked choice voting? Keep watching or visit the link below. Ranked choice voting is a simple way to let voters rank candidates in order of preference. First, second, third, and so on. If your vote can't help your first choice win, it counts to your second choice instead. Here's how it works. If one candidate gets over 50% of everyone's first choice votes, they win and the election is over. However, if no candidate reaches a majority, the candidate with the fewest first choice votes is eliminated, and their supporters' votes will count towards their second choice. This process continues until one candidate reaches over 50% of the vote. Ranked choice voting is an easy way to give voters more voice, more choice, and makes for a stronger democracy. Learn more about ranked choice or try it out for yourself at betterballotvermont.org/BTV 2024.
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. This mayoral debate tonight is hosted by 7 Days and Town Meeting TV. My name is Sasha Goldstein. I am a news editor at 7 Days, and I'll be moderating tonight. I'll be the host, moderator. We hosted an in-person mayoral forum in 2018 and then a virtual one in 2021. So we are just thrilled to have everyone here back in person. It's really great to have the community involved and out in person. So thank you all for coming out. The other thing too, we did have some people submit questions in advance, so you might hear a question of yours in the mix tonight. Many thanks as well to Town Meeting TV. They are a great community service. They host and film election forums all month long, as well as city council meetings. Really great partners to work with, and just an absolutely fantastic community service. So thank you to you folks. I also want to shout out, sitting to my right here is 7 Days ace Burlington reporter Courtney Lambden. I think a lot of people here probably know her and or have read stories by her, and she's been here going on 5 years. We've never had better Burlington coverage, so we really appreciate Courtney and her work. And of course, I want to thank our candidates for making the time to come out tonight. We're really excited again to have everyone here. A reminder, city ballots will be mailed to all registered Burlington voters next week. You can also vote, or instead you can vote in person on Tuesday, March 5th, which is Town Meeting Day this year. And this year's mayoral election will use ranked choice voting for the first time since 2009. I'm going to avoid getting into the details, but if you have questions about how it works, 7 Days will be publishing an election guide with some details on how it works, and there are good resources online as well. We've been playing on the recorded version of this forum a VPIRG explanation of how it works, so that's kind of fun too. Here's the run of show for tonight's debate. Each candidate will have 1 minute to give an opening statement, and then I'll start asking questions, and each candidate will have 90 seconds or less to answer. If a candidate is named or referred to in another's answer, that candidate will get 30 seconds to respond. And in some cases, at my discretion, I will ask some follow-up questions. And on those, we'll give about a minute to respond. Toward the end, we'll have each candidate ask another candidate a question. And to wrap up, everyone will have an opportunity to give a 1 minute closing statement. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our 4 candidates. Sitting just to my left here is Joan Shannon, a Democrat. Next to her is Emma Mulvaney-Stanek, a progressive. And then we have 2 independent candidates, Chris Hazley and Will Emmons. So this is the order we're going to start. In this order, we're going to trade off who goes first. And to start with opening statement, we'll start with Joan Shannon. 60 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you, Sasha and Courtney and 7 Days and Town Meeting TV for having us here tonight. I am Joan Shannon, and I'm running for mayor because I believe Burlington is at a pivotal point. And I have demonstrated the courage, the leadership, have the record and the experience to help Burlington navigate through these rough waters. While I am not a new union organizer, I'm very proud to have received all 3 of the city union endorsements that have endorsed so far, including AFSCME, which has 300 members representing all departments of the city. I also have the police and fire union endorsements, and the unions know what Burlington needs in their leadership. The unions share concerns about our safety. I want all of us to work together to heal, restore, and celebrate our Burlington. Thank you.
Thanks so much. On to Emma.
Thank you, and thank you to the organizers tonight. I'm Emma Mulvaney-Stanek. I'm a mom of 2 small kids. I live in the Old North End for almost 20 years. My kids go to school in the Old North End and childcare there as well. I'm a small business owner. I'm a former city councilor who sat at this table not too long ago, and I'm currently a state legislator representing a portion of Burlington. I'm also a proud former labor organizer for over a decade with the largest labor union in the state, the Teacher and Support Staff Union, Vermont NEA. I have a deep love of Burlington. I grew up in central Vermont. This was the vibrant, energized city I wanted to move to when I came home from college to the state. And it's such a beautiful and vibrant place to live. And yet, I'm running for mayor because I'm deeply concerned about the health and well-being of our city. There's a divisiveness in our city hall that's permeating into our community, and it is unraveling this community that was so beautifully engaged when I first moved here 20 years ago. So I'm running because I'm uniquely qualified to bring this city back together with my local and state policy experience, and I'm excited to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. On to you, Chris.
First, I want to say how grateful I am for everybody who signed my petition to help you actually get me on the ballot. It was a sprint to the finish. I'm very grateful for all that hard work, and I wouldn't be sitting here at the table tonight if not for all your support, so thank you to everyone who humped there. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Chris Hazley. I've lived here in Burlington for 25 years. I've lived right around the corner here in downtown. Currently serve on the Church Street Marketplace Commission. Previously served 4 terms on the school board where I fought for neighborhood schools and livable wages for our support staff, and I'm pleased to say that I received the Outstanding School Commissioner Award from the Burlington Teachers Union. I entered this race because of what was not being talked about. For the better part of the past few months, we've heard a lot about public safety, but the city's facing a number of serious challenges that haven't gotten a lot of attention. We're facing some serious fiscal challenges here. Our credit card is maxed out. We're looking at a deficit. We have an aging infrastructure, and we need to hold the line on taxes. There's a number of fiscal challenges, and so far I'm the only candidate who has pledged to do that.
Thanks, Chris. Go ahead there, Will.
Hi, my name is Will. Thank you for having me. Like Chris, I went and got my 200 signatures before putting my name on the ballot. I want to thank everybody that signed for me. I was a longtime union representative with the American Postal Workers Union. Throughout the years, I ran for 3 consecutive terms as president. I went around the country training on how to represent workers. And, beyond that, I filed a lot of cases on behalf of my constituents in order for them to get proper representation in wages, hours, and working conditions. I also ran for 1 term as state president for the state of Vermont. The American Postal Workers Union is a 330,000 member nationwide organization, and our local had a few hundred people. And after I moved on from the union, I also was awarded a full scholarship to Champlain College, and I did a lot of community work with the children in my neighborhoods, and also coach sports, baseball and basketball, and recently got my property casualty license. So thank you very much. And I think that Burlington, the direction that Burlington has gone there's a lot to be desired. And I would ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. All right, as I said, we're going to move on to the question and answer portion. and we'll start with Emma on this one. Many residents, visitors, business owners, and their employees have said they feel unsafe downtown. As mayor, what would you do to restore that sense of safety for everyone in Burlington?
Thank you. Everyone in Burlington deserves to feel and be safe. And as a mom of two small kids, I feel the fear and anxiety of how our community has really changed. And I want to make sure that this community is not only safe for my kids and your kids, but everyone who lives in this community. And I do mean everybody, everyone who also visits. Our city, when you call for help in our city, you deserve a timely and appropriate response. And we have to send the right kind of professional who is best prepared to help you in your time of need. And that requires a comprehensive understanding of the complexities facing our city right now. There's a lot of suffering on the streets of Burlington from a lot of complex systems that have failed over many, many years. This does not happen overnight. And my top priority is really going to be community safety. And I use that phrase very specifically because it is bigger than one entity. We need to think about this in a comprehensive way to solve how complicated these issues are. On one hand, we have to get to the root causes. We have to look at gun reform on a state level and how that impacts our community and our sense of safety and violence and preventing and intervening with violence. We also have to look at those failing systems I mentioned before around basic needs, how there's a record number of people who are unhoused in the streets of Burlington, a crisis with opioid use and people struggling with substance use disorder, and then, of course, the cracking mental health and healthcare system in our state. And so, again, not one cause has caused these challenges in Burlington. And I'm almost ending here, so I'm going to say we're going to need a right-sized police department and a comprehensive support that really resources social workers and mental health professionals as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to you there, Chris.
I think the first thing we need to remember is that we're dealing with people, and we need to make sure that our policies are people-focused. And when I look at the situation here in downtown Burlington, it's something I see and live every day. It's very clear that our system and our approach is not working. And not only has our approach to housing been a profound failure, I would say it's been fundamentally wrong. We wait till people are out on the streets before we offer to give them any help. And that is infinitely more costly and leads to it doesn't lead to good outcomes for people. So I think first and foremost, we need to fundamentally re-engineer our approach to housing and move away from trying to solve houselessness and actually trying to prevent houselessness. And I think one of the ways that we can do that is to implement a program to have like the supplemental income to help people keep the housing that they already have. One way to do that, although certainly not the only way, would be to explore the possibility of a pilot program for a universal basic income as they've done in Houston and Denver. So that would be the first part. And I think if we can tackle the housing piece and get people housed, that would very much go a long way to dealing with many of the issues that we have. When someone loses their housing, it sets in motion a series of events. Typically they lose housing, then they lose the job. That can lead to mental health issues, which can in turn lead to substance use disorders, and it just becomes a downward spiral. So by fixing the housing problem, we can go a long way to dealing with the public safety challenges. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Will, go ahead.
Okay, so as far as public safety goes, if you read my website, which is wilfordbtv.com, I've outlined staff 2.5 plan. It's 112 officers. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I believe that a lot of the concerns, and I've gone house to house and business to business, a lot of the concerns are that people that used to feel safe here during the nighttime don't feel safe here during the day. And I think that that's a major concern because, like I said, former union representative, no members, no union, no taxpayers, no mayor. So I think that it's important for the tax payload to not be distributed amongst the people that are left by encouraging new businesses to come back and taxpayers that are leaving to come back. And how do you do that? Well, you do that by providing an environment that exists with public safety. And I think that our police department was defunded. And if you look at what I said during the last mayoral election, as I am the only returning candidate, I also spoke about the citizens and the residents and the police getting sold at the lowest possible level. I think that in order for Burlington to be thriving as it once was, I believe that we need to have a place that's safe for children to walk to school, because we don't have school buses in this city, and I think a lot of parents share that concern. So, thank you.
Thanks, Will. Just a reminder, candidates, if you can move the microphone up a little bit. Chris, too. Yeah, just make sure you're a little. Joan, to you. 90 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you. In 2020, I vocally opposed the defunding of the police from 105 to 74 officers, which was led by the Progressive Party. That has led to some of the public safety challenges we have now, not all of them. When you call for help, I think you should get a response, and I think that there is room for improvement, even with the defunded state we currently have. Today, we only have 21 officers available to patrol Burlington, 24/7, 365, the whole city. My public safety plan starts with deterrence. We need to rebuild our police department. I believe we need more police officers. We also need a diversified police and public safety service, and we've done that in many ways since 2020. We need prevention, as Chris talked about. We need much better mental health support. We need interventions that in our schools so that people aren't getting addicted to drugs in the first place. And we need treatment. We don't have access to treatment when people ask for it. I also agree that housing is a very important part of this. People spiral when they lose their housing, and the mental illness and other things that they're suffering from get worse. And in the end, we need accountability. When you're openly using and dealing drugs in City Hall Park, in our downtown, that is our community living room, and there needs to be intervention and consequences for that action. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to start this time with Chris. Do you think Burlington's police oversight system is working? And what do you think the mayor's role should be in reviewing civilian complaints?
Process is important, and I think it's the foundation upon which our government and everything else rests. I think the current model with the chief providing discipline works to an extent, but if it were up to me and I could re-engineer the process, what I would do is I would provide the police commission with an opportunity to initiate an investigation if they were not satisfied with the decision of the chief. They would then in turn come to the city council and make their case, and the city council would then hear that evidence, and the city council, with mayor presiding, would make a final decision as to what could be done. But whatever we do, we have to protect the due process rights for everyone involved, and that includes the officers who put their lives on the line every day. And being an officer is much like any other job in some ways. In some ways it's very different. But it's similar in the ways that if you're coming home at the end of the day and you're like, why am I doing this? Like, people don't appreciate what I'm doing. I don't really feel valued here. It's usually a pretty good indication that it's time to find a better fit elsewhere. And I think that a lot of the challenges we faced here are a result of a culture. It's going to take time to rebuild, and to just simply say, oh, I'm going to put more police on the street, it's not reasonable, because it takes time to get these folks through the pipeline and trained, going to the academy. So I think it really needs to be a balanced approach that protects the rights of everybody to ensure that everyone gets a fair hearing.
Thanks, Chris. Let's go to you next, Will. Thanks.
Yes. As far as oversight goes, in about 2017, I was out on the street. It was over, they call it the murder mart. It's a Shell station. And I witnessed a guy acting in self-defense, and the guy was up around his neck, and he acted in self-defense and basically knocked the guy out. And and there was some racism involved, and then following that, the guy was charged as a defendant, should have been charged as a victim, basically. And so what I did was I made a couple phone calls. I spoke about this during the last election, and it didn't work out. I spoke to a couple police officers. I spoke to a couple lawyers, and I made a couple phone calls to one of them was to Bernie's office. When I didn't get any results, and no disrespect to anybody, I went and I wrote the guy's whole case, wrote the witness statement, and I hired him a lawyer. And I also solicited a couple statements from the store clerks over at that store. And so as far as oversight goes, I do think that there's a time and a place for the community to be able to have a voice in order to maybe get a case resolved, because I wouldn't rely on a public defender if I was anybody in this room. I go to Paul Jarvis for everything. So, basically what I did was I wrote the case, and Paul's degree, law degree, got the case dismissed. So I definitely think that there's a time and a place for the community to be involved in maybe resolving a case that's unjust. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. Go to you next, Joan.
Thank you. I believe that the police should be held accountable for doing their job according to their training and directives. I support codifying the changes we made to police oversight in 2020. But when we're talking about police oversight, I think it's really important that we are actually working with the Police Commission, who is charged with doing a lot of this oversight at this point, as well as the police union, to understand how we can fairly supervise and professionally supervise a very difficult job. I really think that we focus too much on punishing officers, because at the end of the day, we're punishing officers because something went wrong and somebody was impacted. And a far better solution is actually to intervene in ways that prevent police officers from going off course, from using bad judgment. And we need to help them. We need to have a process of review that intervenes before something goes bad. The number one concern I hear in our community about our police is they don't come when they're called. If we want police to come when they're called, we need to hire more police officers. We've had too many cases where somebody is trying to break into a home and somebody calls and the police don't come because we don't have the police to come. And while I support diversified services and appropriate response, the police are an appropriate response in many of these cases. Thank you.
Just, if I could stay there for a second. You mentioned dealing with issues before something goes wrong, and obviously there are some of our neighbors in this city who don't trust the police. I think there's definitely a schism there. How would you address that issue, the lack of trust with police officers?
Back in 2020, at the same time we defunded the police, we also defunded other community policing efforts. We defunded Creamy with a Cop. We defunded SROs. By reducing the number of police officers, we reduced their ability to engage engage with the public. We want foot patrols. Well, you can't have foot patrols when you only have, 3 or 4 people covering the entire city. So we do need better engagement, and we need to, provide those opportunities, and I support that.
Great, thank you. Next to Emma.
Thank you. Both the community and police who work for the City of Burlington deserve a better, transparent process of what accountability means in Burlington, because we have to do better in this regard and move with a lot more urgency than we have so far on this issue. It's been years, and we have to also acknowledge and be honest that harm has happened here in Burlington at the hands of some of the Burlington police, and that disproportionately has impacted Black and brown folks. It's disproportionately impacted folks living with mental illness, for folks who have young people in their lives who are struggling. It is not a safe place to call when you have had that erosion of trust, and we have to be honest about this. As leaders, we have to have the humility to admit that this is not a perfect system, and we have to, again, move with that level of urgency. As a former labor organizer, I'll tell you, employees appreciate when there is a clear process, and it is not every employee where there is an issue, but you have to, again, have the political courage to say, there is something wrong here in Burlington, and we deserve to move this forward so people know what's expected of them. And finally, I was really disappointed. We had a compromise, and this city government recently failed to move something forward, and we're going on 4 or 5 years of not having an answer for what police accountability here in Burlington means.
Yeah. We're going to let Joan have a rebuttal on that.
May I have a rebuttal, because she also mentioned the Progressive Party earlier?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. I just wanted to rebut because an action of the City Council was mentioned, failing to take action on police oversight. And I just wanted to note that 3 out of 4 progressive city councilors voted no on moving that forward. I voted yes on moving it forward, but after hearing from the public, I voted to refer it to the Police Commission. Thank you.
Thanks.
Can I have a rebuttal?
Emma, we'll go to you.
To me.
Yep.
Well, I wanted to speak earlier. First of all, there's a lot of reasons. A yes-no vote when you're elected leader is a very binary choice. So there's nuance there that people need to understand on this vote. And I want to emphasize, again, it took 4 years to even get to what was a compromise between Democrats and progressives. But this idea of the staffing that got shuffled around in 2020, there was a great urgency and a reckoning happening in our country. People were realizing people were being harmed and killed at the hands of police, and elected leaders needed to act. And we haven't been able to implement over 4 years what was really needed to have a more comprehensive community safety program in Burlington.
Do I get a rebuttal at all?
No. All right, we're going to move on. The city made large investments with federal coronavirus aid, including the creation of the Elmwood Pod shelters and hiring city staff to end homelessness. But that funding will soon run out. As mayor, would you continue to fund these initiatives, and do you foresee needing to increase taxes to do it? We'll start with you, Will.
Yes, and again, this is on my website. I think that the state of Burlington right now is a disaster. If you take a look at what I've written, I plan to defund vagrant housing initiatives. Reason being, well, let's go to our 27% dropout rate for a second. It's 5 times the national average. If you take a look at we're spending per pupil $25,000, it's also $10,000 more than the national average. And if you take a look at the fact that we're spending approximately $60,000 to $79,000 per homeless person, and then think about what it has done to our city, the fact that our businesses and our taxpayers are leaving, we will not have taxes to help anybody soon. So what is the true cost to our city? Is it $79,000 or is it at least twice that? Because every business and every person that I've interviewed has told me that something has to change. And I think that those are the hard decisions that somebody has to make. And, it's not something, it's not a PR stunt. I think that a lot of what's happened in the administration leading up in the last 9 years has been a PR stunt. And a lot of people have told me that they're sick of that as well. So going house to house, I developed my own flyer. It wasn't something that I just concocted. It was actually something that I took as a review from a lot of different people. So I understand whether you're a progressive, Democrat, Republican, Libertarian. I think that those parties are supposed to represent working people and students and families. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. Go to Joan.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we cannot shelter a large portion of Vermont funded by a regressive property tax here in Burlington. We really need the state to take the responsibility that they have for providing basic shelter. But this isn't an issue of just funding. We're losing the sites. We don't have the site where the Elmwood pods are is going to be redeveloped. The VFW that is currently the winter warming shelter, that too is going to be redeveloped. So even if we had the funds, we could not continue these sites. I do think we need to continue to provide shelter. We need to continue to try and figure this out. The communities that have been making some progress with homelessness, it's because they have shelters that have availability. Even with the pods, even with the warming shelter, we don't have any available beds. And this is a crisis. People are suffering on our streets every day, and a lot of these people, they're elderly, they're infirm. People have walkers who are living in tents or just completely out in the rough. And we need our state to step up and address this. We did it for COVID. We built a hospital at the fairgrounds. That's the level of crisis we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Go to you, Emma. Thanks.
Thank you. So the folks who are suffering in the streets of Burlington are Vermonters, they're our neighbors, and they come from communities up and down the state. And I've actually, the one candidate in this race who actually has experience in this exact issue. I led a coalition of Democrats and progressives at the end of the last legislative session on this exact issue, because we were sounding the alarm with the abrupt end of the motel emergency housing program that exactly what has happened in Burlington would happen. And while we were able to put some compromises on the table through a lot of hard work, we were not able to house everyone in that program. It is an imperfect program. But it shows that when you start to actually work together in collaboration and realize the urgency of the matter, that there is literally nowhere else for people to go. Many of these folks are employed. Some of these folks have families with children. Some of these folks are living with disabilities. We have to provide the level of dignity and understanding of the complexities of what it takes to house people. So that's also why we need a diversity of options that we need to be developing instead of just these short-term, high-cost solutions. And it's yet another example of how we need to elect a mayor with state experience and local experience, because this is a Vermont challenge in the streets of Burlington. And we cannot be alone in trying to solve these issues or fund it, because that's not fair to Burlingtonians. And there's great opportunity to continue to do more and be more effective in the State House. We have not been effective as a state delegation, and I would change that as mayor. Thank you.
Go to you, Chris. Thanks.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me now? Usually I get in trouble for being too loud. So the pods are, in my view, a half measure. And when you look at, can you guys hear me now? Is this better? Like, kiss the mic.
Pull it. Yeah,
There we go. Let's get some slack here. Can I reset the clock at least, since I'm having some technical difficulties? Yeah, so the pods are a half measure, and when you look at the population that they're serving, a number of these folks are struggling with a substance use issue. That is a medical condition. That requires medical treatment. Putting people in a pod, putting them up in a hotel at, I think, was it $3,800 per person per month, I read? You know, we're treating the symptoms. We're not treating the cause of this. What we really need to do is have a conversation about building a new state hospital, maybe 100 beds, something that will focus on substance use disorder and mental health conditions. But I'd say part of the reason we're in this situation is because our legislature is failing us. They have not done their work to get us up there. We need medical treatment for people, and this approach is just not working. What I would like to see in its place would be something akin like a 3 or 4 story dormitory style housing, single room occupancy, shared living quarters, or shared kitchen, shared facilities to get people moving forward. But I believe that if someone has a medical condition, we need to give them medical treatment, and we're simply not doing that. And we put them up in the hotel, we pat ourselves on the back and say, look what we've done. We can feel good that we've kept them off the streets and kept them from dying from exposure. But in the reality, what that really says is we're not willing to spend the real money that's required to actually get these people well. So again, I think we need to have a serious conversation about focusing on a new state hospital.
Thanks, Chris. We're going to stay on the housing theme here. How do you plan to address Burlington's housing shortage, including creating permanently affordable housing? And we'll start with you, Joan, 90 seconds.
Thank you. As many people know, I am in the housing business in sorts, and I really believe that home ownership is a way to build wealth. Too many people in our community and beyond have been denied access to home ownership. And in our own community, 60 to 70% of Burlingtonians are living in rented housing. Much of that where rents can continue to escalate year after year. Being able to buy your own home stabilizes your family finances. And the housing we're building now is generally rental housing. We need to find ways to build condominiums so that people can own their apartments. We need to work on condo conversions where people are currently renting could buy the apartment that they're living in. That's something I'm working on now on the City Council. There is funding from the federal government as people exit offices. There's lots of office space, there's not enough housing, and there's federal money available to convert offices to housing that we need to access. We need to continue to work with both nonprofit and for-profit developers. We need more units, and we need more affordable units. And we need to help our developers to access those federal funds. Ultimately, in our rental market, we need to achieve a 5% vacancy. And I've worked on several initiatives on the council with the South End Innovation District and Neighborhood Code. Thank you.
Thanks. We'll go to you, Emma.
Thank you. So I'm very concerned about affordability. It's one of the reasons I ran for mayor. We're at the risk, and we've already started to lose the economic diversity that makes Burlington so vibrant. I myself hold my breath when I open our property tax bill for our tiny little house. It's not that tiny, but tiny-ish in the Old North End on a small lot, and that's with 2 very decent Vermont incomes. And so we have to recognize that there's a lot at stake when we talk about understanding the affordability crisis. It's not only about building more housing, because we've been decades behind with creating more housing for folks to move into, but it's also keeping housing here in Vermont, in Burlington in particular, actually affordable. So a few ways to think about that is for homeowners looking at how we do our tax system on a local level and making sure there's an income sensitized option for folks to be able to, who have fixed incomes or folks who are working families, be able to stay in their homes and keep up with property taxes, much like our state system. I also think we should expand the grand list, and that will happen as we continue to do the upzoning process to allow more dense housing development to happen in the city. And we have to make sure that's affordable, and I want to look at our inclusionary zoning ordinance, because we're at a risk of having that ordinance not be strong enough to make sure actual affordable units are built instead of just a contribution given to our housing trust fund. We don't want to turn into Boulder, Colorado, where that has happened because the cost of development is so high. So this one I'm going to be laser focused on because I'm feeling the heat myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Go to Chris.
Must be nice to own your own home. I can't afford it. I work in the IT sector. My wife's a middle school teacher, and we make good income. We cannot afford $500,000 for a home here in Burlington. It's simply unaffordable. I talk to our young people. I talk to our young people, and they tell me, well, I have to look in Moncton or Jericho or Underhill or Fairfax, to get out of the city to find the zone of affordability. You have a family in the Old North End in a rented 2-bedroom apartment. They've got a 3- and a 5-year-old. They want to have a house with a backyard to kick the soccer ball around. They can't afford that here in Burlington. And part of the reason that we have this is because we have a university who keeps increasing its enrollment of out-of-state students. And there's a reason for that, too. And that reason is because they, the university, are not getting adequate support from our legislature to provide the kind of quality education that we would have for Vermonters. And at one time, UVM was the school of choice destination for Vermont students, but not so much anymore. And so that's another area where we need to address. Another factor that contributes to our housing affordability is the tax increases. And if you're a homeowner and your taxes go up, well, maybe you can benefit from income sensitivity. But if you're a renter, not so much. It just gets passed along. And so every time we raise taxes, property taxes specifically, that hurts renters. And as someone who's been renting for 25 years, I understand that all too well. And I believe in the American dream, and I believe that one of the things we need to do in this city, particularly if we want to accomplish our goals regarding equity and inclusion, is to promote single-family home ownership for folks that have been traditionally marginalized through practices such as redlining. Single-family home ownership will allow the creation of generational wealth. Generational wealth is the #1 way to move people out of poverty. So I think we need to find a better balance, and we need to get back to a situation where the city's 50% renters and 50% homeowners.
Thanks, Chris. Go to you there, Will.
Yes, and that's a nice thought. I'm not sure if we can get to that point, but I would say to people, take a good look around you. Forget about politics. I think if the current state of Burlington is what politics was like, I don't think anybody in this room would want to be a politician. And that's definitely one of the reasons that I'm running. I was the owner of a low-income unit on Blodgett Street, and I, like many other people, couldn't afford the taxes in this town. And as far as building housing goes, Champlain Housing Trust, like I said in the last debate I was in, has a great first-time homebuyer program that I would suggest for anybody who's trying to get a home at an affordable rate. But our infrastructure in Burlington needs to catch up to housing. I read a questionnaire that was sent to me the other day about how all the surrounding towns, which by the way are all booming in this local homeless problem where we're soliciting people from across the country to create a crisis.com. We actually are not able to keep up with Williston and places like Heinsberg because they're developing on open land. They're putting water and street infrastructure and sidewalk infrastructure, all places we need to catch up at, and many homeowners have complained about. And that is the place where Burlington can't develop at that same rate because we have to catch up on infrastructure. Look at us; we're one of the biggest polluters of the lake. And, I think that's major concern for infrastructure. And, keep your infrastructure in production with your housing production. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. I do want to stay on the housing issue, and Chris brought up UVM, and I want to go there. Do you think, and this is, Emma, we're going to start with you. Do you think UVM should cap enrollment as a condition of being allowed to upzone their land?
Yes, because we'll never solve this issue if they continue to increase student enrollment, which is the evidence. I'm an evidence-based decision maker, and the evidence shows over the last 10 years when they've increased housing on campus, they've increased student enrollment. So the math just frankly doesn't work. And even in my portion of the Old North End, we now see students being pushed into our neighborhood. And I love students, but the rents that they're being charged, the babysitter we had across the street in not a very healthy-looking building was being charged $2,000+ for a 3-bedroom, which is probably not a real 3-bedroom. So UVM needs to be a partner in with the city, and a good working relationship is one where both sides understand that their mutual success is dependent on each other. If Burlington is suffering and there is a housing impossibility, we'll never retain or recruit, or a smart student is never going to stay and put their roots down in Burlington because they simply cannot afford it. And we also have to understand there's even more we can be doing beyond housing with institutions like UVM. When we actually think about and slow down the process to think about what is our community need, what is our benefit that we need. And one thing, for example, with UVM, I would want to reopen the conversation around the closed childcare facility that they closed about 3 or 4 years ago. That has a dramatic impact on working families. And so we can be imaginative, we can be creative, and we can have a much stronger relationship with these institutions instead of just narrow topics of just housing. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. Go to you, Chris.
I think it's a conversation worth having, but again, the reason that UVM is admitting more students is because they're not getting the support that they need from the legislature as a publicly funded institution. So yeah, I think we can have that conversation.
Okay, thank you. Will?
Okay, so UVM and housing was the question? So I thought I just answered this one.
No, this is a different one. This is, do you think UVM should cap their enrollment as a condition of being allowed to upzone their land?
Okay, so I answered this in the last debate as well. I mentioned in UVM, Champlain College, and any other college that exists in the city of Burlington, hiring an employee with no job for that employee, that's the same thing as getting a student in-house without housing. So as far as upzoning goes, I wrote an essay in college on collectivism, and in that essay I spoke about a wise person. I believe that person I used as an example was the deceased president. It was George Bush Sr. And whether you love or hate him, a wise person that knows how to change in zoning can impact the outlook of a neighborhood over a 10-year period. I think working with the colleges, in an effort to make whatever they do in the best interest of Burlington and the Burlington taxpayers, is always something that's got to be number one on the agenda. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. Go to you, Joan.
Thank you. Building housing to add more freshmen and sophomores on college campus, only to then have those same freshmen and sophomores move off campus junior and senior year, is the only kind of housing we could build that would actually make our housing problem worse. I believe that there needs to be some guarantee. If we're going to give them the zoning that they want, we need some reasonable guarantee that this isn't going to happen. We also have to look not only at the undergraduates, but what is happening with the graduate students. We're being told that we're not agreeing to a cap, but we're going to keep the enrollment at 3,000 students per year. But what about the graduate students? I understand that's where the growth is happening. I'd like to have some discussion about that. I'd like to have some discussion about public safety needs and other impacts. I also want to recognize that we're very lucky to have the university. We want it to be successful. We want them to thrive because we are interdependent on one another. So I know I'm kind of taking a hard line, and I've taken a hard line on this MOU issue, but I do think we should continue to negotiate with UVM. I would like to see them build housing because I would like to see them help students find affordable housing on campus and leave the off-campus housing for the professors that can't find housing at UVM. Thanks.
Thank you. We're going to start with you here, Chris. What should be done with Memorial Auditorium, and how would you pay for it? How would the city pay for it? I don't expect you to pay for it.
Those are certainly some good questions there, Sasha. So if you saw my previous debate, I think you all know what my economic development strategy is. Burlington needs a new civic center, and while I had hoped that we might be able to refurbish Memorial, it's my understanding that the structural issues there are just that it's so far gone that it's become a case of demolition by neglect. But as the largest city in Burlington, 45,000, or largest city in Vermont, 45,000 people, we absolutely need a new civic center. And I think the civic center would be a community asset that we could use to hold community events. We could hold youth events there, provide a new home for the now displaced 242 Main, which was has been shuttered now for several years. And I think that we could anchor it with a minor league ice hockey team. And I would like to think that we could have it be community owned, like the Green Bay Packers, so that it will perpetually remain here in Burlington and will bring people into the city on the weekend during the winter months when there's not a lot going on. So that's my approach to that. I think in terms of a design, I would put up three. One that would maybe evoke the look and feel of the current Memorial Auditorium as kind of a nod to the tradition there. Maybe another one that Richardsonian Romanesque, that's one of my favorite styles. And then, maybe a more modern structure that would complement the existing downtown. So I'm not sure really that much can be done with it, but I do think that we have a very clear need for a community space.
Great, thank you. Same question to you there, Will.
I think that the Memorial Auditorium is a staple of this community. I think that Burlington residents, longtime Burlington residents, should stand up and fight for that building to stick around. For one, historical preservation. For two, how many concerts have you seen in that building? I used to have my freshman basketball practices in that building when I was on the BHS freshman team. My mother has seen numerous concerts at that building, including Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, and who else, Ma? In any case, I watched my brother get his kneecap kicked up his thigh in that building on his first MMA fight. I spoke to Julio Fernandez earlier today. He said he hosted 14 events at that building through Vermont Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. How many kids has that building kept off drugs? How many kids has that building kept out of violence? And, organized Golden Gloves, organized mixed martial arts, numerous concerts, basketball practices. That building is a staple of this community. I did my interview with WCAX at that building this morning. They asked me where my campaign office was. I said the Memorial Auditorium. I rest. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Will. Try to top that. Joe.
Thank you, Will. Nope, I'm not going to try to top that. I think we all have the kind of experiences that Will is just talking about. I know that I do. When I started on the city council, I actually was the president of Preservation Burlington, and there is nothing I would like more than to save Memorial Auditorium. I guess this is an all-hands-on-deck moment. If anybody here has a way to save Memorial Auditorium, come forward now, because time is out. I want to save Memorial Auditorium. I want to save it as a community space that we all have loved and celebrated. But the reality is, we do not have the money in the city to do it, and the voters have said no many times since the 1990s. It's been shuttered since 2018. It can't continue the way it is. I may not get what I want. We have to do something, and most likely we're going to have to do it with private funds unless somebody comes forward real soon with a way to pay for keeping this the public asset that I think we all want, but can we afford? How do we pay for it? I don't have a way to pay for it and keep it a public asset. If I could find a way to do it, I would do it. Thank you.
Excuse, can I rebut that? She mentioned my name. I'd like to rebut that. Citizens of Burlington, that building is easily refurbishable. I mean, come on now. We just watched our high school get stolen from us, and I think a lot of people are very passionate about that at every door that I'm going door to door at, in North Burlington, South End, and you know, the rest of the city that I'm attending to. And you know, to try to the city's the strategy that we've seen for the last several years, and the reason why Burlington citizens need to stand up for that building is because the strategy has been to let a building become vacant, let that you know, let the citizens keep banging their heads off the wall, thinking, oh, we got to get this building refurbished. No, we can't do it. We can't get it done. Oh, it's impossible. How are we going to get this done? And then we're just going to knock it down and put a big high-rise residential unit in its footprint. You guys got to say no to that.
Thank you. Emma, we'll go to you for
Okay, thank you.
90 seconds. Thanks.
So I think there's a lot of lessons that we have to understand in the issue of what we're doing with Mayoral Auditorium. And when I look at these issues, I think about what does the community need today and in the future. I think about emphasis on meaningful community engagement and where the city has done that well or not so well. I also think about the obligation as city leaders to protect public assets. Those are the framework that I look at when I look at Mayoral or anything else for the city. And so Mayoral, it is at this point. I sat at this table 12 years ago as a city councilor, and Mayoral was falling apart then. And it was a failure of our city to really know how to prioritize and fiscally plan to make sure we can maintain these gems of our city. And so one of the things we need to start to do is figure out how to prioritize, how to fiscally plan looking far in the future, and have all of you have a meaningful engagement to tell the city in a sustainably fiscal way, what are our priorities? And if it is Mayoral, then it is Mayoral. But there's more on that block that we should also be keeping in mind. The health of our library, the health of the fire department that's on that block, and then a whole host of other city assets. I would bring more meaningful engagement to this bigger discussion about capital and our public assets in the city, and would make sure there'd be a participatory system that felt good for all of you to make sure that we were saving the things that are critical and being honest about the things that we can't save. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Yep. I'll give you 30 seconds.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, I think that we had one of our really better public engagement processes around Mayoral Auditorium, and we know a lot about what people really value, what are the community benefits that they want in that building. And we went through a lot of process, and we did a lot of analysis about what it costs. And the bottom line was, even with a public-private partnership where we'd had some private activity, but retaining the public piece of it, that we weren't able to pass the bond to get that done. So, thank you.
All right, we're going to move on, and I want to ask a hypothetical here. So the hypothetical, and I can repeat this if anyone wants in the middle, but so we're going to start with you, Will. The city gets permission to open an overdose prevention site, and the proposal is to put it in your neighborhood. Would you support opening such a site, and what would you say to neighbors who are apprehensive about having such a facility next door?
No, I would not. You know, and I think that this is an issue that a lot of people feel a lot of different ways about. And, you know, like I said, you know, in developing kind of like the way I plan to go about it, I spoke to a lot of people. And, you know, what we've done in Burlington is solicitacrisis.com. 3 years ago when I ran for mayor, I spoke about bringing new sand to the beach, despite how many rappers tell you not to bring sand to the beach. I spoke about bringing sand to North Beach and raking it on a daily basis with the machinery that we actually have existing in this city that's being neglected because of the risk of a kid stepping on a needle, or a college kid stepping on a needle, or a parent stepping on a needle. And now that's a daily occurrence. And the answer is not to invite more drug addiction to our neighborhoods by opening open injection sites. The answer is to stop it from happening. And, I grew up in low-income neighborhoods. I grew up, the neighborhoods I've been canvassing is Northgate, the trailer park. I'm hitting South Meadow next. I can't even call it. Those are the neighborhoods I'm focusing on. And so I've seen people with needle addiction problems growing up, and some of them got clean and some of them did not. But at the end of the day, I think it's the city's responsibility to support children, working people, families. You know what I mean? The community fabric that we once had, and I think that's destroying it. So no, I'm against it.
Thank you. Joan, same question to you.
Thank you. I do support overdose prevention sites because I think that they will save lives and they provide a pathway to treatment. At the same time, I think we need to look carefully at how there's a pilot program proposed that I think is likely to pass, but we need to look carefully at how it works in our community. The examples that we have are in communities very different from Burlington. I think anybody would be apprehensive if they were informed that an overdose prevention site was going into their neighborhood, and we would need to have some honest conversations about that. There was a study done at Brown University by former Chief Brandon Del Pozo that showed that there was not an increase of crime around the overdose prevention sites. Nonetheless, I think people would be apprehensive. I think one of the other concerns is the evidence that we have and the data that we have are based on our heroin epidemic, and we've now moved on to fentanyl and xylazine and other drugs. Are they as effective? Is there a difference? So we do need more data when we run this pilot. I think it's important to be thoughtful about the data that we're collecting to evaluate it. Thank you.
Go to you, Emma.
Me? Okay, thank you. I proudly supported this pilot overdose prevention bill that passed through the House about 3 weeks ago because it literally saves lives, and we are beyond the point where this needed to be a tool in our toolkit in Vermont. And I would advocate as mayor in Burlington for it not only be located in Burlington, but to work with stakeholders. That includes medical professionals, because substance use disorder is a medical disorder. And we have to start thinking about it that way and treating people with the respect and dignity that indicates that this is, at the end of the day, a medical disorder. And so working with medical providers, working with professionals in the recovery community and in the treatment world, I would work with them to figure out what the best placement would be for an overdose prevention center in Burlington. And because we want to make sure people are able to access it, we need to look at public transportation. We have to look at where folks can most easily access it based on the day of the week, et cetera. Because at the end of the day, I want to make sure we're saving lives so that people can get into recovery, get on the path to find treatment, work with the state, obviously, to get even more treatment beds in existence in Vermont. But at the end of the day, make sure that we're focusing on those folks' safety and well-being. And as a secondary part, it will help with the quality of life issues of needles on the streets and folks having to have the trauma of seeing people struggling with addiction on the streets as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Go to you there, Chris.
Thank you, Sasha. So I think the first step to solving any problem is to acknowledge that there is a problem. And as a downtown resident, I see the struggles that folks are facing every day, and it's just not right. And people say, well, I really don't need to see people openly injecting out in public. And it's like, well, there's a reason for that. They're unhoused. They have nowhere else to go. So I think, one, providing an overdose prevention center, not only would it provide better outcomes for people and save lives, but it would also solve this other ancillary issue that folks in the business community have been very, very concerned about. The other thing we need to acknowledge here too, with the problem is like, well, people are camping in the city, and we had the big discussion there. Well, newsflash, they're camping here whether we like it or not. And so I think the way we address that is to embrace it. And when I look at the situation here, I'm like, well, we have this wonderful facility just a little bit up the avenue. It's designed for camping. It's got power. It's got electricity, water, showers, and it seems to me that it's vacant 9 months out of the year. It seems to me like that'd be a good place to have people go camp, and maybe bring services there. So, I'd like to see that these things happen. And while we're on the topic of harm reduction, I think we need to deal with the folks that are service resistant, the folks who are overdosing and requiring Narcan multiple times a day. And for those folks, I think we need to have a very serious conversation as a community about establishing a compulsory program for compassionate custodial care. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. We're going to go to another question, starting with Joan. How would your administration balance the need for a National Guard partnership with constituents' concerns about the F-35 jets? And did you support the basing of the jets here in the first place?
Thank you. I'm not a fan of the F-35, and several years ago, when the basing decision was made, we had a ballot question that asked people if they would like us to request a different mission, and the answer was yes. I wrote the resolution to ask for a different mission, followed up with the Secretary of the Air Force, and made sure we got an answer, and the answer was there was not another mission that we could have. So my preference would be to have something quieter than the F-35. That is not an option. So I have to deal with the options that we have. And by having the military at our airport, they pay for the fire services at the airport, which are about $3 million, I believe. We have a fabulous airport here in Burlington, and one of the reasons we have that fabulous airport and the air service that our economy depends on is because of all that the military pays for at that airport. I value the airport, I value Beta Technologies, I value the health of our economy as a whole, and that's the sacrifice that we have to make is the F-35. Thank you.
To you, Emma. Thanks.
Thank you. I have always been opposed to the F-35s. I was raised by two peace activists who live in central Vermont still, and it's always been a values-based decision to me around what F-35s actually represent, and then of course, now that they're here, the negative quality of life and the public health issue that they raise by flying over our heads on a daily basis. It's also the climate impact, and really being honest and transparent around the emissions that these large planes put into our community on a daily basis. So I think we had a lost opportunity when the lease reopened with the National Guard a few weeks ago now to not slow down that process again and ask deeper questions about what is possible. I spent about 2 minutes on Google when that came out because I was already a candidate, and other communities handled that so differently with what was possible with that back and forth with the Guard. Now we're locked into a lease of 50 years. My kids will be long adults at that point. And I think we have to be looking at these big moments with a very different lens around accountability to our community, our health and our need of our community, as well as making sure that we're pushing where we can about more appropriate missions for the National Guard. We can be creative, but it takes leaders actually having imagination and doing research about what else is possible. And even when I've met with the Adjutant General there at the National Guard, and there are other missions out there that can be located here that can be still a jobs-based program, but we have to be imaginative and we have to be courageous to put different options on the table and not just give up and roll over a lease.
Thank you. Chris.
So while we're on the topic of the military, first and foremost, I would like to thank our veterans for their service, for the men, women, and non-binary persons who put on that uniform to carry out the duty and carry out the foreign policies that are set by our leaders. I think it's important to note that the folks who serve in the military, they don't set the policies, but they carry it out. And they do so sometimes at great personal sacrifice and great hardship, some of them paying the ultimate sacrifice. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that as well. I'd also like to say that as for the F-35, again, as folks have observed, I think the opportunity to address that has passed. My personal preference would have been to try to get a mission that is more consistent with Vermont values. I think that maybe bringing some C-130 Hercules here and a medical airlift mission would be appropriate, perhaps fire suppression, transport, and maybe there's an opportunity to continue that conversation down the line. But at this point, I think we missed the boat on that one.
Thanks, Chris. Will?
I would echo what Chris just said about the veterans. Thank you for your service. One of my closest friends is a lieutenant, he was in the Vermont National Guard. I believe he transferred. Actually just sold his house in the city of Burlington and was telling me that the taxes were ridiculous around here and what can we do about it. Encouraged me to run for mayor, and flew medevac helicopters out of that very airport that we're talking about. I would just remind the citizens of Burlington that we have so much heritage in Burlington. The Green Mountain Boys are from this area. As far as F-35, I'm not a disputer of it. I support it. I support that. I support our police, and I think that Burlington, the main problem in Burlington is public safety and education. I think that those are the things that I would hammer home here. Infrastructure, education, policing. Safety, you know what I mean? You walk outside your house right now, what do you see? What does it look like? To me, it looks like a war zone. Well, the military is actually there to protect us from something like that. But how do we protect ourselves from ourselves? I think that's where I'm looking right now. I'm looking within myself and trying to figure out how I can be the best person I can be and how I can make Burlington the exact best that it possibly can be. And the fabric of community that we once had and restoring that and remembering, to always try to put the best foot forward, especially if you're a 9-year-old walking to school. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. Emma, we'll start with you here. Can you tell us about a time you changed your opinion on a policy issue after receiving new information?
I would so I serve on the House Commerce and Economic Development Committee in the Vermont House. This is my 4th year in that committee, and it is a pretty moderate committee. It's led by a Northeast Kingdom Republican as the chair, and so my first year on that committee also was COVID, and it was all online, so I'd never met these people before. But we were coming out of COVID, and there was a dramatic use of unemployment. Probably many people in this room probably experienced that themselves. And so when we depleted this unemployment, when so many people use unemployment, it depletes the fund. And so the policy solution is, we had to come up with an employer tax relief because it would have required a huge tax increase the next year to refill that fund, essentially. And so at first I was resistant to that because I was worried about the workers and focusing on the workers who needed more support as well, coming just out of that economic crisis. And so through a lot of deliberation and conversation and understanding how important it was for the employer side of it to make sure that they could make sure that their bottom lines were able to be restored after COVID, I understood about the balance of doing something for both sides of the ledger, if you will, both the claimants, the folks who are unemployed, trying to get back to work, as well as a tax relief for employers to make sure that we were handling that fairly and having a steady hand as we return the Vermont economy, workers and employers, back to some sort of normalcy after COVID.
Thank you. Chris?
Universal basic income. When I first heard about UBI, I was like, wow, this seems kind of a pie in the sky kind of thing. But as I've seen the data from places like Denver, Houston, Sacramento, Houston, Denver, usually I'm told to tone it down. Yeah, but universal basic income. When I first heard about it, I was kind of skeptical. But as I've seen the data come in, it's really had a very positive effect. And we've seen cities like Houston, Denver, I think Sacramento, some places in Canada have adopted it, and it's had a very profound and positive effect on bringing people out of poverty. Folks are using these supplemental funds for rent. for food. Some folks were able to start saving for a house or for their children's education. And so I think that, again, this ties in very well with the strategy of, instead of fixing homelessness, let's try to prevent it in the first place. While I still have 35 seconds here, I'm going to pivot a little bit to talk about education, because my wife's a teacher and I'm a former school commissioner. And there is another crisis here that we haven't really heard a whole heck of a lot about, and that's the crisis of literacy. And while these issues typically fall within the purview of the school board, good schools are the heart of Burlington, and we need to support our schools. And as mayor, my approach would simply be to go to the school board and say, what can we do to better support you on these initiatives to help improve graduation rates and to make sure that our kids have the background and skills that they need to be successful in today's world?
Will.
Yeah, I got to echo what Chris just said there, schools, and I got to hammer this one home again. 27% dropout rate, and, I was speaking along the way. I spoke to a guy who told me that his son had reported to him that there's an ever-growing group of students in that Macy's project that are either at risk of or becoming suicidal. And, because of the dire situation down there. And it's not just in the schools. We heard this during the first debate, which actually on Martin Luther King Day I was told I was not going to be able to participate in. Imagine the irony in that. Because Martin Luther King stood for participation, human rights, unionism, et cetera, all my history, as a matter of fact. And so, during that first debate, we heard moderators talking about kids having meltdowns in school. Well, guess what, guys? They're walking out their door, they're seeing overdose deaths, people foaming out the mouth, needles all over the place, a guy shooting up with his pants down, nodding out with a needle still in his hand. These are what our 9th grade kids are seeing walking to BHS. Not to mention the other kids in the Edmonds school system, I, as a parent, care a lot. I care enough that I pulled my son out of the Edmonds school district and sent him to the state of New Jersey because I had better economic services for him down there. When I say economic services, I mean basic public school. With the 27% dropout rate, we are well below Vermont's 93.5% dropout rate. Graduation rate. So it needs to improve, and housing, I think, is something that's being solicited. People from across the country are being solicited to this city, and it's actually causing us a major controversy.
Thanks, Will.
Solicitorcrisis.com. Just got to stop, guys.
Okay. Joan, on to you.
Pro tip, Chris, pull it in.
Thank you, Joan.
An issue that I changed my mind on, I think was the question.
Yes. Can you tell us about a time you changed your opinion on a policy issue after receiving new information?
Okay, thank you. I would say safe injection sites. That was not something that, when I first heard about them, I didn't think it was a good idea to set up house for people to illegally shoot up drugs. That definitely wasn't something that I thought would be helpful to our community. But I listened to a lot of people. I listened to experts that had a lot of data. We have an organization called ComStat in the city, and there's a lot of discussion, definitely about safe injection sites and other things around the opiate crisis. And I worried a lot about really the question that you asked, how do you feel when this comes into your neighborhood? I think the information that was provided by Brandon Del Pozo in the study that he did at Brown, looking at the impact on communities, gave me more hope. I also talked to a lot of families who have loved ones who are either in recovery, still in the throes of addictions, have lost their loved ones, and I think one of the more common themes, there's a lot of different situations, I hear a lot of different things, but I would say a more common theme is that there's a feeling that we do need boundaries, but that safe injection sites are helpful to keep somebody alive and get them into treatment. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, we'll start with you here. What does diversity mean to you, and how would you reflect that in your administration?
Diversity means ensuring equality of opportunity for everyone, for folks that have not always had that. And I think it's very clear that the way that our system here in the United States is set up is that some folks have been very much at a disadvantage from day one. And to the question about equality, I think, again, we need to go back to housing. We need to promote single-family home ownership as a way to bring people out of poverty, particularly the folks that have been marginalized and cut off. And we've seen in a lot of BIPOC communities throughout the years that they're not able to simply get ahead because they're not able to build generational wealth. So I think that that's a key piece there. I also think that when building out a team, you look first for people. You look first for character, then you look at values, and then you look at skills second. And the first thing I would try to do is to build out a team that reflects the diversity of our community so that all voices are heard and so that the decisions being made are robust and truly reflective of the community here in Burlington. And I think based on what I've seen, I still think there's a fair amount of work to be done in that regard, and I look forward to doing that work.
Thank you. Will, same question to you.
Yes, diversity. And you know, I've heard the name a couple times tonight, Del Pozo. That was the exact reason I had to get somebody a lawyer in 2017. You know, last I checked, he got ran out of this town. I wouldn't trust a stat that came out under his name, especially the one about how to racial profile. So how does diversity look in this city? Well, take a look at the pictures. You see the mayor digging a hole at the pit. See any black people in that picture? Me neither. I would check some of these pictures, because if people keep talking about diversity and nothing ever comes to fruition, then something is wrong. Take it from me. Take a look on my website. Take a look at the people that I grew up with. Diversity has existed in the city of Burlington in different courses over the course of my history. When I was young, it was Bosnians and Vietnamese. We all played basketball. You know, and then, you know, my best friend was Romanian, you know, but his best friend was from Yonkers or something like that, you know. So we consistently built on that, and I think that if your officer, if your mayor, if your president, if whoever really cares about diversity, then you're going to see it in the photos around them, you know. And I think that that's what's been lacking in Burlington. And again, you know, what I was saying about look around you in the streets of Burlington. Take a look at the walls. Take a look at everything. Does it look like we're not in crisis to you? Does it not look like a war zone to you? Because if you can't see in the pictures any diversity, then something's wrong, because we've been talking about that since 2014. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. Joan, same question to you.
Thank you. When we're talking about diversity, generally, we're talking about racial diversity in the city, though I think it can mean a lot of different things. It can mean a diversity of opinion. It can mean a diversity of economic class. It can mean a diversity of, you know, where you came from. But in terms of the racial diversity, that, you know, we have a long history of not having the racial not having representation in our community that we need. And we see that in City Hall. I think we need to be cognizant of it. I think that we need to create systems that help us get the diversity that we need. We need to reach out to communities. We can't expect that it's simply going to happen naturally if we keep doing what we're doing, because it's not. We have systemic racism in our community. We need data and analysis to determine how we overcome you know, why don't we have the diversity that we want? We need to better understand that, and we need professionals within our city to address that. Thank you.
Same question to you, Emma.
Thank you. In order to create a livable and safe community, we have to acknowledge the role of diversity and looking at marginalized communities who exist here in Burlington and who will come to Burlington, hopefully. But the way that we do that is to make sure that folks who are marginalized and hold marginalized identities, be it racial identity or a gender identity or another marginalized identity, that they truly feel they can belong here and that they are truly valued. And the way that you do that is that the city needs to do a better job of seeking counsel and involvement of marginalized communities. That goes back to what I talked about before as a former organizer, of engaging the most impacted people. Those are where the best ideas come from. Those are where the truth will be told about how folks are experiencing our city who are not in those dominant culture identities, which have been represented in these halls of City Hall for way too long. I think we also have to understand this takes conscious action action by the city to make sure that we are sending our resources and prioritizing things like the Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Office, which was started with a lot of COVID federal dollars, and making sure that if that's a priority and a conscious act by the city, we have to continue to see that as the resource that it is for the city. I've benefited from the Office of Racial Equity as a legislator because it is a meaningful part of state government to point out where there are structural barriers, where there's harms being done in the policy that we're making. So Burlington can do a lot better in this space, but it has to be one where we build relationships and trust with marginalized communities because they have been harmed in many cases here in the city, and leaders need to have the humility and understanding of how to repair that harm to move forward. Thank you.
All right, we might have time for one more question before we get into the questions for each other. So Burlington will soon have 13 cannabis stores, including a large cluster within blocks of each other around the Church Street Marketplace. Do you think there needs to be more regulation around where and how many of these stores can open in a specific area? Why or why not? Will.
You know, I would say that as a kid, it was something that you couldn't do on the streets. You'd get arrested for that. Then in 2012, I went to Los Angeles on business, and I saw a dude ripping a blunt right in front of a cop. I was like, "Are you insane?" And he was like, yo, don't worry about it. They do that out here. And then so years later, I came back to Vermont, right, Dave? Dave's my right-hand man. He's on my left today. But in any case, I came back to Vermont, and, you know, same old same. And then so over the years, I've seen the evolution, you know, of the marijuana industry. And, you know, if it's bringing back bank, then bring more stores. If it's not, then don't. You know, you know, like, I think our entire economy is in a disaster situation right now, and so, you know, cannabis stores. Does it bother me that you can go pay taxes to the state of Vermont by buying a joint at a shop? No, not at all. Actually, I don't even care if somebody rips a blunt on the street. I'm more worried about somebody shooting up in public, and you know, that problem that's being solicited to this community, again, hammering home public safety, education, and shooting up on the street, needles on the ground, the risk to public health emergency that is needles on the ground. You know, but as far as cannabis stores, that bothers me none. If they have to build more, and that's, you know, going to help our community, and it's going to benefit the state of Vermont taxes and the city of Burlington taxes, which is in fact dying right now, then so be it.
Thanks, Will. To you, Joan.
Thank you. I'm actually chair of the Cannabis Control Board and have dealt with this issue from that perspective. When we first started giving licenses from the Cannabis Control Board, we were told we didn't even have the addresses. There's so much protection around these places. All the information was redacted, and we were told we weren't allowed to vote no on them. It seemed like the most ridiculous process I have experienced on the city council. So I think we should have some control over whether we say yes or whether we say no or how many we have. I'm not sure why we have so many cannabis stores, unlike liquor stores. I guess the liquor stores, I probably don't know enough about this, but it seems like we have one liquor store in town or a couple liquor stores in town, and yet we have all of these cannabis stores. So I think we should be able to, I mean, I supported legalizing it, and I support having them, but I think we should also have a little more control over them than we do. Thanks.
Thank you. To you, Emma.
Thank you. Well, one of the things that I want to name in this process of legalizing and allowing cannabis to be sold as it is that there was a really good social equity component of this legislation that became law in Vermont that allowed folks who've been harmed by the drug system and criminal justice. These are BIPOC-owned, BIPOC folks. It is folks who've been involved in the criminal justice system for marijuana possession, et cetera. That was consciously built into this law, and that's something Vermont should be really proud of. So while we talk about the number of stores, let's remember who are owning these stores. It's predominantly women-owned, BIPOC-owned, folks who've been somehow involved in the incarceration system. So with that said, I want to make sure those folks are set up for success, and we think about how to create the economic vibrancy for them to be successful wherever they locate. So I think it's a balance of making sure this process continues to get tweaked so towns have the information they need, but it's balanced with preventing NIMBYism to make sure that towns also can't completely just say no to the location of these businesses. Again, knowing who right now the first wave primarily, again, are folks who've been marginalized from this war on drugs failed system. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, to you. Nice.
Learning. I think that, I believe in my body, my choice, and I think what people do with their body is their choice. When it comes to cannabis, it's definitely a growth industry. We've seen a number of jobs created here as a result of that. And I think that at the end of the day, so long as someone wants to open a business, if they meet the legal requirements to do so, and they go through the process and get permitted and open a store, I think at that point, well, let the market decide. So since I have another minute here, I'm going to pivot once again. Let's talk more about infrastructure, because it's not just Mayoral Auditorium. We have some other serious issues that, once again, are not being talked about here. Our sewer plants, our water treatment plants are facing end of life. The Church Street Marketplace garage is 50 years old, it's end of life, $20 million price tag now, and could cost as much as $30 million by the time we actually get around to replacing it. We saw what happened with the school district. Once again, that was a case where the legislature just decided they weren't going to start funding school construction anymore. That worked out so well for our high school. And then I look around at the rest of the school buildings, our elementary schools and our middle schools. A lot of them were built in the 50s and 60s, and at some point we're going to have that conversation. So we probably ought to start that now. And right now there doesn't really seem to be any kind of plan for how we're going to deal with our aging infrastructure.
Thanks, Chris. All right, as promised, we will let the candidates ask another candidate a question. So on this round, we will start with Joan.
Sasha, can you clarify that? So each candidate gets one question only, or one question for each of the other candidates?
One question for one candidate, for one other candidate, yeah.
Okay. I have a question for Emma. You're shocked. Really? Yeah. For several years, we had an encampment at Sears Lane where we failed to remove people from public space, and it increased in size to about 30 to 40 people. Essentially, it was a sanctioned encampment. We provided dumpsters. The city provided dumpsters, a portalette. In that encampment, a camper was blown up. There was rampant drug use, drug dealing, theft, violence, and other criminal activity, often directed at neighbors and passersby. I believe you're on the record supporting camping on public lands. I wondered where you would allow people to camp in Burlington.
Thank you. Minute and a half. Okay. Thank you for the question, Councilor Shannon. So I'm supportive of people camping on public lands because, number one, it's public land. But number two, we are living in a severe housing emergency where there is literally nowhere else for people to go. So we have to look at this with a commitment to understanding that reality and a commitment to understanding our own economic privileges for those of us who are housed right now. And we also have to build a safer community, and that includes folks who are unhoused, most people would not actively choose to live in a tent in the middle of the winter in Vermont. But that is the sad reality that we are living in right now. So I would want us to look at building a more transparent and reliable and consistent camping policy, acknowledging the emergency that we're living in. Right now, where people are locating for camping purposes, they're engaging with different parts of city government. It's not consistent. That's not a place to build relationships and the trust that's needed to help transition people into the kind of services they need, and ideally the kind of housing they need to be set up for success. And I think think we could do a whole lot better there. But again, fundamentally acknowledging these are Vermonters. These are folks who deserve respect. These are folks who have been suffering, and I would offer an open hand to make sure that we're finding a compassionate route for them to live in more safe housing.
I know you just had to speak, but now it's
Oh,
your
I
turn.
get the mic back. I love this. Okay, it's great. The Leo in me loves the mic. Okay, here we go. So, Counselor Shannon, I have a question for you. You ready? Okay, shocker. All right. Throughout the campaign, I have spoken about the need for a comprehensive community safety solution that uses evidence-based approaches that includes police, social workers, and substance and mental health providers. Counselor Shannon, you have shared that you believe in a phrase that you've used, a phrase you've used is treatment first approach, which includes short periods of incarceration. What evidence have you used to formulate this approach, given the lack of current treatment beds and a backlog of cases in our court system? How will you actually implement this approach on day one?
Thank you for the opportunity to clarify that, because I don't think that that's what I said at all. What I have said in terms of housing is that I support what I call a housing first, a hybrid housing first, treatment first approach. And what I mean by that is that for most people, housing first works. We need to get people into housing so that they can get the other wraparound services that they need. But what I hear from people providing this housing is that some people don't do well in this type of housing because they need more supportive care. Sometimes it's an addiction that's too far gone, or a mental health illness that makes them incompatible in that living environment, and they need treatment so that they can be successful in that housing environment. That comes actually from the housing providers that I have talked to. I have not actually said that people being incarcerated is only part of my public safety plan. It's really not part of my public safety plan. What's part of my public safety plan is that people need treatment. We need to improve treatment, and it is true that this isn't something that we can do as a municipality. We need the state to do that. We need to better use the Medicaid funds that are available to us. We need to use them more effectively. We're only giving people 2 weeks at Valley Vista, where other states give them 4. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
I'd like to ask a question of Emma. I know that you've been a champion of diversity, equity, and inclusion, yet some of the organizations sponsoring these debates seem to have not gotten that memo. So my question to you is, will you agree to boycott any future debates that do not include all 4 candidates?
Well, I think there's 2 separate questions there, because one is around access for candidates, and the other is around a whole separate topic of diversity, because when I talked earlier about diversity to me is...
A simple yes or no will suffice.
You don't need to interrupt me, Chris. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think that I'm glad that we have ranked choice voting, and I think we should be allowing all candidates to have an ability to get in front of voters.
I don't think you answered the question.
I answered the question. Thanks, Chris.
Okay. Thanks. Will?
I don't think the definition of equality changes from conversation to conversation. I love that. In any case, 7 towns surrounding us are booming, guys. I don't see some of these crises of the 7 towns surrounding us that are booming and soaking up our businesses. I just wanted y'all to know that before I ask this question. Okay, so we've talked a lot about drug crises tonight. Now, in 2008, there was a drug dealer. He was on the run. I believe he was on the run from police. If not, he was on the run from police just after this happened. My sister was mowed down, and she had to have reconstructive surgeries on her face. She was on the UVM cycling team. And, my question is for Emma. I want to know, because this guy was on the run. I guess he had a pocket full of Oxycontins or something like that. Now, when the police did their job and they tracked him down because he swapped the plates off his car. And, when they tracked him down through an investigation, he initially pled not guilty. And she made a full recovery, and she is going on to cure cancer or something like that. Super, super genius. But in any case, I want to know, a lot of the conversations that we've been having have been surrounding a person not being penalized for, using drugs. Or I want to know, if this happened today, person gets hit by a car, reconstructive surgery, guy's on the run, bunch of drugs involved. Do you think that a person using drugs should jump behind the wheel in that situation? Do you think that's happening in this crisis that we're soliciting here? And also, do you think that the 3 years that he got was enough or not enough, being that a person's face got reconstructed in this? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question, Will. I'm glad that your sister seems to be doing better. I'm sorry that she was harmed in that situation. One of the most important things in any sort of criminal matter is not to forget the fact that there are victims of crimes who need to have a comprehensive response to not forget them in the impacts of crime. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the ins and outs of that case. I will say that our criminal justice system right now here in Vermont and here in Burlington is severely backlogged. They're under-resourced. We do not have enough judges to actually even clear the dockets from back during COVID, which is not helping. So if we're going to have more accountability, we have to go into it with eyes wide open around the fact that our current court system is not working. And I also think that we have to tease out folks who are repeat offenders, because those folks are creating the most harm in our community and deserve our laser focus on making sure that we hold them accountable, but also ultimately make our community safer, and again, not forget the victims who are impacted by this. One last thing I'll say is just 2 weeks ago, T-Rugs had a hostage situation. I was outside on North Street when that was actively happening, trying to pick up my kid at Sustainability Academy. There was a lockdown happening. I had no information. It was highly alarming. My 4-year-old was a block closer to the incident. There are many people who are impacted by this, not just the folks in the immediate harm, but we have to make sure that we're resourcing all of the comprehensive responses so that we can heal our community and support the ripple effects of harm that happens. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are now going to go to closing. Emma, it seems like the mic keeps, I know, you don't get to catch a breath, but.
I am going to drink some water, though.
Yes,
take my union break.
Please, yeah.
Ready?
I am.
Okay, great.
Yes.
All right. Thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you to the organizers. I want to put together, I am putting forward a vision for Burlington, one that is actually based on where we need to head in terms of building back a community and bringing our community back to each other. I've been concerned about the health and well-being of our city. This is why I turned from the State House back to Burlington to offer my leadership, my approach, and my vision for Burlington. We deserve a safer community for everyone. We deserve a community where people are, we value and prioritize the economic diversity that keeps our city healthy and vibrant. And we have a lot of big challenges that require a unique set of skills to solve these challenges. We need to elect an organizer. We need to elect someone who has the local and policy experience that I offer. And we need someone with the compassion and drive to make sure we can bring a collaborative spirit back to Burlington so that your voices are not only heard and listened to, but acted upon. Thank you.
On to you there, Chris.
An Olympic hockey coach once said, "Great moments are born from great opportunity." And that's what we have here in Burlington, a chance to come together and move this city forward and do great things. Every one of us deserves to feel safe, no matter who we are or where we came from. And every one of us deserves an opportunity to relax and dream. The question is, do we continue looking over our shoulder, or do we look forward to a better future? Burlington's greatest strength is its people. We have all of the expertise we need right here in this city, but we need a better process, a process that respects diversity and provides ordinary residents with a meaningful opportunity to participate and be heard. a process designed to bring out the best in each and every one of us so that we can move this city forward together as one Burlington. I'm tired of hearing about all of Burlington's problems and how the city is in decline. We have the power to change that, each and every one of us, one vote at a time. At the end, Burlington wins with people, not with politicians. It's time for something new. Now get out there and vote.
Thanks, Chris. Will.
Thank you guys for having me tonight. I think I would echo what Chris just said. The community. Remember, if you grew up here or if you just showed up last year, just remember the sense of community and collectivism that we once had, and the fabric that intertwines. Whether you're a low-income housing person or you live in a mansion up on the hill. We all met downtown. That was our place. The towns surrounding us are soaking up the businesses that are leaving. Like just today, a couple more got announced. And, that's just never something that I've witnessed as long as I live here. I never thought I would see it. And how do we build our way out of that? Well, first and foremost, you do have to acknowledge that there is an issue. And then secondly, you have to vote for change. And I think that at this point in time, I think that I would ask for the citizens. Most of you hopefully will vote for me. I just ask for you to rank me number 1 instead of number 4, okay? And, just consider voting for not just the same party, different suit. Try to remember how we got here and remember how you want to get us out of it because, me, Will, I was a coach over at Lyman C. Hunt. I was a coach over at the Boys and Girls Club. Wherever my basketball team at, that's where I showed up at. And that's how I got to know a lot of the parents in this town.
Thanks, Will.
And, thank you for having me tonight.
Thanks, Will. Last but not least, Joan.
Thank you. I ask for your support as mayor of Burlington if you agree with my vision to improve public safety by rebuilding our police department and diversifying safety services, to build more housing, to bring partners to the table to address community health needs, and to remember and celebrate all that is absolutely fabulous about this city that we all love. Our strength is in our community, I agree. I am the candidate who has the proven support and confidence of all 3 city unions and have endorsed so far in this race. Our city workers are united in their concerns about public safety, functional governance, leadership that listens, and the health and well-being of our staff and community. Thank you all for your participation here tonight. And please, go spend your money downtown and let's celebrate what we have here. Thank you.
So with that concludes our forum. Thank you all so much for coming out. Let's give a hand for our candidates. Thank you so much. And don't forget to vote. Again, ballots are coming next week, so you have a chance to vote mail-in.